Our story today begins 6 billion years ago, somewhere near the cosmic region that we will one day inhabit. A star goes supernova. In its fiery death, energy levels are reached far beyond what a star can achieve in its lifetime, with creative potential well beyond that of stellar nuclear fusion. This most rare of events is called the R process. The supernova explodes into an atomic nebula that wanders through space, cooling over 4 billion years. Atoms combine into compounds. Compounds form dust particles, and gravity begins to pull the vast cloud inwards towards a singularity. This gravitational pressure generates tremendous heat, and at 10 million degrees Celsius, our sun bursts into existence. On a rock orbiting at a distance of 150 million kilometers, warmed by the sun, carbon atoms, oxygen atoms, hydrogen atoms, and nitrogen atoms form complex molecules that self-replicate and start to evolve. 3 billion years later, a mostly hairless species of ape develops a previously unseen pattern of behavior. Adherence to an intersubjective dimension of reality. Most crucially to this story, the shared belief in the value of money.
Oh, I ran to the river, it was boiling, I ran to the sea. It was boiling, I ran to the sea. It was boiling all on the bay. So I ran to the Lord, I said, Lord, pardon me. Please help me. Please help me all on that day. He said, child, where were you when you ought to have been praying?
In 1312, Mansa Keita was appointed regent of the Mali Empire under Abu Bakr II. The vast empire of Mali occupied a geographical region called the Sahel. This landscape is an intermediary of extremes. To the north is the perilous Sahara Desert. To the south are the dense tropical jungles of Central Africa. To the west is the Atlantic Ocean, and far off to the east are the cities of Arabia, Mecca and Medina, the spiritual centers of the Islamic world. Amazingly, every one of these places plays a role in today's story. Even in this relatively early stage of his political journey, Musa is a man with two distinct identities, and each one speaks a different language. One of these identities speaks Mandinka, the regional language of Mali. He would have spoken this language within his court and with family members, but also would have indulged in poetic recitals performed by griots, the bards of Mali society. An example of one of these poems is the Epic of Sundiata, which recounts the origin myth of the people of Mali. It was passed down from bard to bard and performed in public spaces, accompanied by music played on the harp. All history of Mali before the arrival of Arab historians is infused with mythology in this way. This is because, unlike Arabic, which can be documented via the Arabic script, the Mandinka language has no formal written expression, and is thus a purely oral tradition. This makes the Epic of Sundiata subject to the creative whims of each successive generation of its custodians, the griots. Another outcome of this linguistic property is that we can know very little about the family life and inner world of our protagonist, Mansa Keita. So let us turn our attention to his second identity, a public identity, which he crafted very deliberately using the language that tied together the world of the 14th century, the operating system that underpinned the largest free trade economy in human history, Arabic. In Musa's day, Arabic was the language spoken in the Iberian Peninsula, in thriving cities like Andalusia, all the way to the Pyrenees that connects modern-day Spain with modern-day France. It was spoken in the Eastern Mediterranean and Mesopotamia, Damascus, and Baghdad, as well as cities that dotted the Silk Road, Samarkand, the Persian metropolis of Tabriz, all the way to Kashgar in the modern region of Xinjiang, China. Arabic was spoken in the Delhi Sultanate, which ruled India and all the lands to the south of the Himalayas, even beginning to appear in trading ports in Indonesia. But there was one city towards which Musa must have looked longingly, despite having never seen it with his own eyes. While Baghdad was the center of the Islamic world during the 8th and 9th century, now, 500 years later, all roads led to Cairo. In 1312, Cairo was one of the largest, wealthiest cities in history. It was a place where East met West, as a junction between the Mediterranean and Red Seas, but also where North met South, mediating trade between Eurasia and the lands of sub-Saharan Africa. It was unrivaled in both the scale and detail of its architecture. An anonymous traveler to Cairo from the 1300s is quoted as saying, "In Cairo, the world comes to trade. Silks from China, spices from India, gold from Africa, and knowledge from everywhere." The only thing that must have inspired more awe in Musa than the great city of Cairo was the man who ruled it. This is a man whose father arrived to the great city in chains as an enslaved steppe nomad, but who now sat on the throne of the most powerful dynasty on earth. We will meet this man later in the story. I mentioned before the 4 geographical regions that surrounded Mali and the Sahel. The first of these regions that I want to talk about is the body of water that we today call the Atlantic, but which Arabs in the 1300s referred to as Bahr al-Zulumat, the ocean of darkness. While a young Mansa Keita and his officers regent looked east towards the city of Cairo, the king of Mali, Abu Bakr II, looked west, out at the boundless ocean. Here I should be careful, as any discussion of West African exploration of the Atlantic can quickly be tarred with the brush of pseudo-archaeology. All I will say is that no one was more interested in this contentious relationship than Abu Bakr II. Something made him yearn to see what lay beyond the horizon to the west. If you draw a line starting in modern-day Mali, along the westerly path of the setting sun, you will eventually arrive in the jungles of Central America, where, in the year 1300, if you knew the right place to look, you would have found pyramids built by the Maya, and already ancient Olmec heads that have been described, perhaps crudely, as African in resemblance. Did Abu Bakr II have some indication of a great continent across the ocean? Some knowledge passed between Mandinka-speaking sailors, never committed to script? This is something we will never know. What we do know is that in 1324, Abu Bakr II set off with 2,000 ships on an epic voyage across the ocean and was never seen again. Thus, on that same year, Mansa Keita, next in line to the throne, was given the title of Mansa, and the legend of Mansa Musa, King of Mali, was born. It is interesting how little we can know about a man who lived 700 years ago, while knowing so much about a 6 billion year old supernova. The man will deliberately tell lies if they are to his advantage, whereas the supernova makes no attempt to obfuscate the truth. So let us return briefly to our supernova, and we can discover where these two unlikely stories converge. The R process that I mentioned in the prelude to this story created the 92 elements that make up our solar system. Of these, there is a small cluster that I want to zoom in on. These are a group referred to as the noble metals. These elements have a distinct property that makes them ideal stores of monetary value. That is, that they do not decay. A coin minted from any one of these elements will hold its intrinsic value until the end of time. An atomic nucleus with 78 protons will create an element that we call platinum, too rare to be currency and too hard to subdivide. An atomic nucleus with 80 protons will create an element called mercury, which is liquid at the atmospheric temperature of our planet and thus inconvenient to transport. But in between these two elements, with 79 protons in the nucleus, an element emerges that does not decay, is scarce but common enough to be of use, and soft enough to divide into solid units of transaction, giving it the ideal chemical properties to be used as physical money. But as if by the hand of a creator with a sense for the poetic, this element is also bestowed with an alluring beauty that has haunted humanity with desire from as early as we remember. I am, of course, talking about gold. It is this dual nature of gold that makes it as globally resonant as it is. It has significance in the realms of both physics and symbolism. It is a bank vault that guards against the forces of entropy, but simultaneously, it is the treasure, calling us to all manner of perils in its pursuit. It represents our spark of the divine, as well as our corruptible shadow. This is the perfect time to discuss the second geographical region that touches the lands of Mali, the dense jungles of Central Africa. Let's take a quick detour. Far away from Mali or Central Africa, we meet a man who lives in the city of Damascus. This man is a government bureaucrat, working for the Mamluk dynasty. His name is Umari, and he's working on a project. To be precise, an encyclopedia attempting to chronicle all the information of the known world. This legendary book can be read today. Its name in English is Pathways of Visions in the Realms of the Metropolises, and it consists of 27 volumes. The hard work of Umari is funded by patronage. Who is his patron? The man who sits on the throne in Cairo, the man whose father arrived to that city in chains. A man who Mansa Musa is destined to meet. Why should Umari be given this opportunity to write such a historical book? What makes him qualified? The answer is that it is exactly his role as a bureaucrat that makes him uniquely appropriate for the task. The best primary sources of information in the ancient world are merchants, as they spend the majority of their lives traveling. When merchants enter the city of Damascus, they need to check in at a local government office. This is where they meet Umari, who asks them if they wouldn't mind also providing supplementary information for his book. There's a large chapter in Umari's encyclopedia on the Kingdom of Mali and its enigmatic ruler, Mansa Musa. The specific subject of interest is gold. Mali is known across the Arabic-speaking world as having access to an endlessly deep well of gold. Umari's book explains exactly how the gold is obtained. The explanation is fantastical. So fantastical that as Umari was compiling his information, he must have been in disbelief. But, as after merchant who rode in from the long journey across the Sahara retold the same story, Umari had no choice but to faithfully recount what they said, and the explanation provided is what is recorded in that book until this day. This is the story it tells. Somewhere to the south of Mali lies the edge of a vast expanse of impenetrable jungle. This jungle is inhabited by tribes known collectively as the Forest Peoples. Every so often, a small group of delegates were sent from Mali down to the Great Wall of vegetation separating Central Africa from the Sahel. They would take with them tokens of their civilization that could be of use to forest dwellers: metal tools, durable woven fabrics, and salt. They would leave these items in neat folded piles at the edge of the jungle, and then they would place on the ground large drums and begin to play. They played the drums in a way that signified their arrival to the people of the forest, and then they left to camp overnight. When they returned the next morning, gold would be left where their items had been, and the trade was complete, without contact having ever been made. In fact, in this centuries-old relationship, no gold trader from Mali had ever actually seen one of the forest people with their own eyes. One only needs to prod at this story just a little bit to infer that it's probably not true. How could such a protocol be established without having ever met? How did they determine the exchange rate for such a varied array of items? The questions pile up. The truth is that this story of the forest peoples, referred to historically as the silent trade hypothesis, benefited one man above all others, and that was Mansa Musa. You see, to have the entire Arabic-speaking world believe that he and he alone could conjure the mysterious people of the forest was a safeguard against anyone trying to cut out the middleman and get in on his lucrative trade. The reality of extracting and shipping the quantities of gold that were entering the Arab world from sub-Saharan Africa, all mediated via the centralized bureaucracy of Mali, could have only pointed to one explanation: a triumph of logistics. Here we see that although those who record history must often fight the desire to print the legend rather than the truth, every so often, it just so happens that the truth is more interesting.
Then they call you see you they laugh, baby. Then they call you see you they shake your waist, yo.
African gold in the 1300s would have been collected in one of two ways. The first way is by panning. This method collects particles of alluvial gold that flow down from the mountain regions through the Niger River and into the tributaries that run deep into Central Africa. Gravel is scooped up from the riverbed in a metal pan and swirled around, causing the lighter sediment to fly off the edges, leaving the gold in the middle. This would have been possible after the rainy season, when annual floods brought with them new particles of gold. The second method is shallow pit mining. This method of extraction could have occurred in mines no deeper than 10 meters. It involved hacking at rocks containing gold and crushing the sediment to separate the pure gold pieces. Neither of these methods is very efficient, and any significant gold yields would have required lots of extraction happening in parallel. The question is, who did all the work? What we need to imagine is an expansive tribal group south of Mali, extending deep into Central Africa, who had all adapted their economies to the gold trade. Men would have mined, women and children would have panned. The yields of each individual were small, but the scale of human labor was immense. Gold would have been taken to local market towns where miners were met by the Diulas, Mandinka-speaking traders who exchanged gold for salt, tools, and fabrics. The parasites in this region made pack animals impossible, so the Diulas would walk with the gold through the forest back to the Sahel. This journey would have required weeks, and the Diulas risked disease and ambush by forest-dwelling bandits. At the end of this journey, the gold arrived in Mali, where it was weighed and a tax was taken which went directly to Musa. The remaining gold was sold to merchants headed for Morocco, Algeria, Libya, or Cairo. Their journey across the desert is one of the most dangerous human undertakings in history, but we will talk about that in more detail later. After the gold reached North Africa, it was sold to merchants from anywhere from Venice to Arabia to India and shipped to every corner of the ancient world. It is said that for every year the Mali gold trade existed, more than 3 tons of gold likely passed through the empire of Mansa Musa. That is so much gold that the tax alone would have made Musa not just the wealthiest man on earth, but likely the wealthiest individual in all human history. In 1352, the famed Moroccan traveller Ibn Battuta arrived in Mali and was shocked by what he could only describe as the women's nakedness. He wrote that women in Mali did not wear the veil, socialized freely with men who were not family, and even had a role in markets and economic life. It is clear from his writings that there was a liberalism in Mali towards their religion, which would have disturbed the sensibilities of the more conservative Islamic city-states. Batuta recognized that while many of the pillars of Islam were flaunted, the people of Mali did practice prayer, and he could not deny that there was an air of piety in the cities of Mali. It seems that Mali had found a place within its religious identity where it could practice Islam on its own terms. Certainly Mali's physical isolation created some space for a creative interpretation of the doctrine of Islam. But it had another effect. One of the 5 pillars of Islam is the Hajj. This is the pilgrimage to Mecca that every Muslim should take once in their lifetime. Despite it being a requirement for any practicing Muslim, no ruler of Mali or Ghana or any West African civilization had ever done it. Islam arrived in West Africa in the 8th century with the first Arab traders who dared to confront the desert crossing. The dominant civilization in the Sahel at the time was Ghana, and the aristocracy of Ghanaian society quickly started to adopt the religion. In Islam, everyone lives in one of 2 houses. There is the Dar al-Islam, which translates to the House of Islam. Under this roof, you are protected from attack by other Muslims, as well as beneficiary to the interest-free credit system, which will become important later. The other house is the Dar al-Harb, which translates to the House of War, and anyone under this roof is a target for theft, jihad, or enslavement. It is fair to say that in the 8th century, Islam made the people of West Africa something of an offer that they could not refuse. We can see the roots of Mali's unique interpretation of Islam in this story, but one thing that may not be so self-explanatory is why, in 1324, despite the extreme danger, the cost, and there being no expectation to do so, Mansa Musa decided to be the first West African ruler in history to take part in the epic pilgrimage to Mecca. What awaited him on that desert crossing was the threat of death by sandstorm, dehydration, or exposure in the nightmare scenario of getting lost. Why on earth would he tolerate such liberalism at home, but then make this sudden grand gesture of piety? Perhaps all things become clearer when I explain that in Musa's itinerary, before his arrival in the city of Mecca, he was set for a long stopover in the Mediterranean city of Cairo. This was Musa's chance to become one of the great men of history. It could be an opportunity for the world to glimpse the face of the empire to the south of the desert and see it for more than its gold. They were going to be treated to a vision of generosity unlike the world had ever seen. So it was that in 1324, Mansa Musa, with a caravan of 60,000 people, including soldiers, merchants, scholars, griots, and family, began the walk north, guided by just a few of the elusive blue people, Tuareg navigators born in the desert and loyal to no empire. Everyone in that caravan must have known that they walked a path beset by the bones of merchants in their thousands. Some got lost, some ran afoul of the infamous Tuareg. We will learn more about these people later. To survive, they would have needed in excess of 1,500 tons of food and an absolute minimum of 12 million litres of water. 10,000 camels were required to carry this load. But the real cargo weighed far more than bread or water. With them, they took an unfathomable 18 tons of gold. Adjusted for the quantity of gold in circulation at the time, modern economists have valued the total purchasing power of Musa's cargo to be the equivalent in today's money to 500 billion US dollars. We have arrived at the third geographical region that surrounds Mali, the vast and perilous desert to the north. A landscape that renders even our mighty caravan insignificant in scale. The atmosphere must have been electrified by the fears and expectations of 60,000 travelers, most of whom had never left the Sahel, embarking on a journey of very real danger. What none of them could have expected was that this desert crossing represented a turning point for the Empire of Mali. And on the other side of this new horizon, the bright star of Musa's empire would itself turn supernova. Mali's moment of glory was about to lay the foundations for its own ultimate demise.